Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to our audience. Welcome to the Filmmakers Journey Roundtable, a roundtable discussion where we invite guests from the filmmaking industry at every level to talk about our experiences and what it's like disappointing all our parents. I'm your host, Nathan Han, a not-so-young producer who decided to join the filmmaking industry at a much later stage in life with zero prior knowledge. So, join me as we take a beginner's perspective into the wacky and wondrous world of filmmaking. Joining me today are our two guests, Nicola Fan, director, producer, and award-winning filmmaker with projects such as Daffodil, Little Tiger, and is it She Objects or She Objects?
Both.
Oh, that's what I was thinking.
That's the word, plain word.
Also one of the 50 chosen to participate in the Werner Herzog Accelerator in the Canary Islands. And then we have Lindsay Robertson, producer, director, founder of Moonlight Entertainment, and also award-winning filmmaker with scripted projects such as My Life in a Box and One Small Visit, and factual projects such as Kung Food, Frontline Fashion, and On the Edge of Chaos. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the question that I always ask everyone, the first question is, what is your favorite movie of all time?
Do you want to go?
Sure. I would say one of my biggest surprise for a movie would be The Holy Mountain by Alejandro Jodorowsky. It is the most surreal, psychedelic film I've ever seen. It was made in the 70s, funded by Yoko Ono and John Lennon. And it's basically about a thief guided by an alchemist to lead 7 people of 7 different planets to enlightenment. It's like it's very out there, but for me, the biggest surprise was, I walked into the movie not knowing at all what it's about, but just trusting my friend that it's going to be a good movie, give it a shot. So I went ahead, not knowing at all what I'm about to expect, but it's really because of that changed my perspective of how movies could be made, how stories could be told. I felt every scene was basically like performative art. It's not realistic in a sense, like how we usually watch like real life movies. This is the whole thing, almost like a painting come to life.
Ooh.
What was the name?
The Holy Mountain.
The Holy Mountain. Sounds amazing.
All right.
Check it out. It's on. There's trailers on YouTube. There should be, because it's so old, there should be maybe a full film even online available. I'm not sure. But I watched it a while ago, but it has since remained one of my most memorable films. Yeah.
I'll definitely check it out.
Yes, please. I always tell that to people whenever people ask me about my favorite.
What about you, Lindsay?
This question always sends me into a panic because I feel like there's so many amazing films. And also, I think I was telling you before, my memory is not that great these days, but the things that stick out to me because I think it's about a moment in time, like where you are at that point in your life and how you resonate with things. So for example, if you asked like a 12-year-old me, I would say the movies I watched on repeat on VHS were like The Goonies, Princess Bride, Space Camp with a very young, mesmerizing Joaquin Phoenix, which I can't find anywhere. I want to show my kids Space Camp, but I cannot find Space Camp anywhere. And then recently, I think like The Substance, just watched that, like things like The Substance, Whiplash, just things that take you in a completely different direction for the genre. From a like film student point of view, what my favorite film was for a long time was Wim Wenders' Until the End of the World. It's a science fiction film. It's incredible. It's about 2 characters that they're basically on the run. They go all over the world. They're being chased. And he has this technology that his father invented that helps blind people see, but he needs to use his eyes. It's like he takes photographs that blind people can see and it can visualize dreams. I can't quite remember. It's a long time since I've seen it. But it was, again, just something I went in to watch in the cinema, had no expectation, and it just completely blew me away. And it's those kind of films that make you just want to work in film and TV because they're just magical, and it's about creating those magic moments, I think, as well. I think those are better than mine. As the audience always knows, my favorite film of all time is Shrek. Oh, cool.
it's something.
It's a good movie.
I think it basically for me. It's the film that I watched nonstop as a kid.
Yeah.
Growing up, it came to a point where, as the viewers know, I could like recite the whole movie off of like top of my head because I watched it that much. But no, I have not as cool of a reason as you guys have for your favorite films. Mine is just, I think it's just a really nice self-contained story that uses, pop culture and as a kid animation. I think I watch it every couple of years, and every time I'm like, it still holds up.
Still holds up.
So
it's the perfect package.
Yeah. So your reasons are much cooler than mine. So.
No, but it's not. I mean, yours are just as valid. It's about how a film makes you feel, right? It could be any film,
That's
and
true.
it's the magic it creates and what you take from it.
I am excited for Shrek 5 coming out.
I didn't realize there was a 3, 4, and 3 and 4.
But I was chasing Toy Story, the whole series.
Toy Story
Sequels.
is great. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people, animations isn't given enough credit. But anyways, moving on. So for both of you, I mean, why film? You guys are both professionals and producers and directors in the filmmaking industry. What made you choose film over, I don't know, accounting?
Accounting was never going to be for me. I always knew art would be something I want to pursue. As to which kind of art, I'm not sure. But long ago, after high school, I knew I wanted to at least do something a bit more practical, perhaps, just to be safe. So I pursued graphic design. And then it wasn't until college that it really refueled or respark my interest in storytelling through films. Of course, I've always liked films. Growing up, we're all quite in tune with what's playing in the cinema, so it's always kind of around us. But it wasn't until college that I got to really try it for myself, and I realized how much more emotional it is as a journey, and the aftermath too, and making a piece. It's actually a lot more work, to me at least, a lot more work than graphic design, such as making a poster or a booklet, for example. With film, you really dive into thinking for the character, or what you want the audience to think, to feel or think about. What's our message here? Blah blah blah. And then making it also is for me almost like a cathartic process of me understanding the world we live in, or the story's world. And then of course, after making it, the reactions that I see from audience is also another layer of surprise and connection. So that's what really drew me into it, despite it being more hard work, less pay. But I think all of that I could overcome when it comes to making a piece that I'm happy with, or at least seeing the reaction that I get from it could trump all of that. Yeah.
I think from a very young age, I was a bit of a telly addict. So my parents worked full time. I lived in the country, they worked full time in the city. So every day after school, I'd come home, and I this is when you had, 3 or 4 channels, and you just, you didn't have any streaming. I just loved watching television, and I love watching movies. And our family, my dad loved gadgets, and he got one of the first families to get a home camcorder. And in those days, it was like, you had the recorder, was the VHS recorder that you'd have in a bag over your shoulder, and then the camera on your shoulder. And I remember he filmed my 7th birthday party, and I remember watching it back on the VHS and just being like, oh my, this is so exciting. And then we'd do little videos for school, like little PSAs we'd make about, don't smoke, don't litter, and all this stuff. And I just loved the craft of it, putting music to visuals, and then learning how to do graphics, or just learning the different aspects that you bring in to craft something, whether it's film or TV or any piece of content. I just love it. I love the craft of it. So I was always very sure that that's what I wanted to do. I don't think I was very realistic in terms of financials and money. I remember someone at university that was studying dentistry, and I was like, why are you studying dentistry? And he's like, well, just to make money. I'm like, people just choose to study things just because they know it's going to make money. That never crossed my mind, which I wish it maybe had. But I was just always like, I did a lot of theater stuff as well, stage management. I just loved that world, and just no matter what, wanted to do that. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I'm drawing these parallels out of nothing, but for you, I think it feels like it's like exploring this visual medium that you've discovered. I'm with you. Did you mention that it was a way for you to kind of learn about the world, but also to see how people reacted to your work and how you can better it? Would you say, are you like a hardcore perfectionist when it comes to your work, or do you kind of try to think like you have to let go in collaboration?
I definitely prefer that, the latter.
The letting go.
I think I started out, I wouldn't say a perfectionist, but I wanted to achieve what I imagined in my head onto screen. But I think quickly over time, I've also learned to work with others, collaborate, because I truly do see the magic in working with others and allowing their thoughts and ideas and contributions to the vision. And more than often, that's where all the surprises come out. And I'm privileged and blessed to be able to be in a position where I could also even pick and choose the possibilities and just push out the best result. So I wouldn't say I'm a perfectionist. I definitely know more of those, but I prefer loosening things up and allowing thoughts and ideas to come through as well. But in a way based on the theme. So hopefully not too distracting either.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Lindsay?
Well, I think by nature I am a perfectionist, but I think looking back on, say the past 20 years, I think perfectionism can sometimes just really stand in your way. So for example, I'd have a million ideas of different short films or things I wanted to do, but I wouldn't want to do them until I knew I could make them perfect. But when is that ever going to come along? I think you've just got to really just go out there and do it and not let someone quoted something to me a couple of years ago. It's like, not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think you've just got to go and experiment and go and do it. And that's something that's taken me a while to learn, I think, because I am a perfectionist, I think. But then on the flip side of that, I think as you get older, and maybe also as a woman, female directors who are, doing big budget films, they're held to incredibly high standard, and their work has to be perfect, or they get, people are ready to rip them down, I think, far much more than men. I know we'll probably go into that later. But I think, so perfectionism can be a good thing in the crafting of it, but it shouldn't let you not take that first step, because then you'll just never, you'll only end up doing 25% of what you've probably got potential to do. So it is about like letting go, just trusting other people, going out and creating something. And then in post-production, which is for me one of the most fun parts, then you've got the time to be the perfectionist, right? So
it seems like then perfectionism is, you should like, as from your experience, you should stay away from that. Because we know everyone has in contact with some filmmakers that might be a little bit too rigid in how their product needs to be. I know a couple of filmmakers maybe like that. And is it better to be rigid and unforgiving on your vision, and that gets you to like the top of the top, because that's what some people think? Or do you have to let go?
As of now, I'm trying to be more flexible, adaptable, rather than too perfectionist. Because I think the nature of filmmaking, there's so many moving elements, so many moving parts. Not everything's completely under your control. Almost basically impossible to have everything under your control. Whilst I will fight for what the story needs, certain elements. But if there are things where I cannot force my way, then we'll just have to let go. And I think by letting go, you feel a bit more at ease, and when you're more at ease, you give more space to other new possibilities that's not necessarily from me on my head. That's what it should look like, holding on to that too tightly, I think, such as in facing life, that's not going to be, it's not enough of a longevity to sustain, I feel.
Right.
I think in terms of like roles, and I think it's good if we look at perfectionism in terms of maintaining standards and striving to do the absolute best in whatever role you are in production or in, film crew. I think that's really important. I hate like sloppiness, or, I think people should really strive to do their absolute best in their role and push the boundaries of their role. But as Nicola says, you know, the whole process, you have to be flexible, collaborative. And, you know, it's something lovely about the editing process is that, you know, a film could end up a million different ways. Well, okay, factual more than scripted maybe, but, you know, that journey of figuring out what, you know, how you're going to tell your story when you're in post, if you're not so rigid, then that's a wonderful thing. That's a very enjoyable thing, I think. You know, you may have a very fixed idea, but then obviously what you things will take a different turn depending on what you shoot or what comes up. And that process of working out what the best story can be for the audience you're trying to reach with the material you have, for the message you're trying to get across, I think that's very exciting.
Okay. Before we move on from that, so for someone who is fresh coming into film, better to be more perfectionist or flexible?
A flexible perfectionist. Can you be that?
Let's try and do that.
An open-minded person that wants to, like,
Okay.
you know,
I agree.
do their best.
Yeah. You have a clear vision, but don't be
Yes.
afraid to.
Yes, because you can't get too distracted by things that doesn't work out, and then you go, oh, let me just try something else, completely different. That's also not a way to keep intact, to create a self-contained piece. But just like Lindsay say, flexible perfectionist is quite an interesting term for that mindset to try to strive for.
Okay. All right. I mean, we've strayed into the fun stuff already, so I just want to, you know, quickly backpedal a little bit. I kind of want you guys to share a little bit about yourself with the audience. You know, a little background, born, raised, trained, just a couple of words, just so they kind of
I'll go
feel
first.
who you are.
So I grew up in the countryside in Scotland. As I said, from a young age, was always very into like the idea of you know, working or training in film, TV. I studied film, TV and theatre at university in Glasgow. I did my third year at Queen's University in Canada, the film program, which was very exciting at that time. This is like the mid-90s, so we actually were shooting films on 60mm. I was learning how to edit, splicing film, and then learning on Avid and things like that. So that was a fantastic time. And then I had done a gap year when I was 17 in mainland China. I lived there for a year teaching English and had fallen in love with this part of the world and had always wanted to come back to Hong Kong or this part of the world. And then my major at uni was Asian cinema. So I studied Wong Kar-wai and fell in love with his films. And then very bizarrely, I got a job teaching drama in Hong Kong. And then I was the week before I moved over in 2000, I was volunteer at the Edinburgh Film Festival. And Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love was the closing film of the festival, which was like, you know, the big deal. The opening and closing films are like the big deal. So the whole last night, the whole closing party was all themed around In the Mood for Love, like in rainy Edinburgh. And because the people I was working with, they knew that I loved him, they let me go with the driver to pick him up from the airport. And so I was like, so excited. I was like, Mr. Wong, I'm like moving to Hong Kong tomorrow. And he's like, oh, whatever. Because he was very stressed because the only print of his film that he'd bringing one print of In the Mood for Love with him to screen for the closing night. They'd made him put it in the hold of the plane. He wasn't allowed to carry it into the cabin. And he was convinced that it wasn't going to come out the conveyor belt. So we're standing there at the conveyor belt. And I'm like, I'm moving to Hong Kong. And he's like, okay, it is fine. And he's like, waiting. And he's like, can you go buy my son a Coca-Cola? Let me just get out of my face. And then this battered cardboard box kind of came around. And it was like the print of In the Mood for Love. And then they had the closing night. And it was the most amazing party and film. And then I moved to Hong Kong the next day. And I just never then worked with him or met him ever again. But I was just obsessed a bit through my studies with Hong Kong and Hong Kong cinema. There's one of his films, Happy Together. There's a scene I think it's there in Buenos Aires maybe. Yes. And one of them is remembering about being in Hong Kong. And there's just about 6 seconds of a car driving along, I think the Eastern Island corridor, but it's flipped upside down because they're on the other side of the world. And I remember just that 6 seconds, I was like, I have to live in Hong Kong. I just thought it was the most magical place. So then I came and I've been here. That was the year 2000. I've been here since then.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does his depiction of Hong Kong match with the reality?
I think so, a little bit, right? That there's that air of magic. You know, there's magic in the air. I'd say there always has been. Yeah,
when you're walking around the city at night, you see low shutter speed and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Bouquet lights.
I think Hong Kong is just, I agree, it's one of the best places, locations to shoot. Yeah. What about you?
My background, I was born in Canada, but basically grew up in Hong Kong. Went to local school and then international school. From international school, that helped me really, actually encouraged me to pursue arts versus local school, not so much. But then, yeah, I then went to college in Rhode Island, RISD, majored in graphic design. And because that's when I really started to fall in love with film again and actually try to pursue it more seriously. Graphic design actually helped me to get into film. Afterwards, I came out and I was working at ad agencies, like a couple of them. Actually, my first job was at JP Morgan. That helped me. I was doing design work, but that gave me an understanding of what branding means. Branding as in how to make a brand consistent in its presence through design elements, through colors, through typefaces. And eventually, with that kind of background knowledge, I got into advertising, and that gave more room to what branding could be besides on print. It's also on TV and commercial space and also outdoor space. So you really get to flex your creativity in a way. But fast forward a little bit, working at an ad agency, I really still can't shake off my intrigue and interest in doing films. Like really tell a story besides telling a story for the product or brand. So in 2014, actually, I took a plunge in faith. Told my parents, like, hey, I'm gonna quit. And they're like, what are you doing? How are you gonna make money? I said, I'm not sure, but I'm gonna utilize my design skills and start off from there first. And that's when I, at the same time, also approach a couple of opportunities to offer my interest in making films for free, actually. So I did a music video for free, a short documentary for an NGO as well, and that gave me opportunities to tell different types of stories for different formats. And that actually helped launch my ongoing opportunities afterwards, yeah, in Hong Kong.
Was that Inspire Hope?
Yes,
oh,
yes.
Okay.
That was my first zero-budget documentary. Offered myself to the NGO.
Yeah,
and say, I want to do, well, of course, it was an NGO whose stories and mission I really felt for. They are specifically an NGO that help people who live in cage homes and or homeless. And I felt cage home living is a very unique, tragic aspect of Hong Kong that deserves a bit of a light to shine on. So yeah, that's how we approached them. But they also gave us an alternative kind of angle to tell that story, which we overall were very happy with. The whole piece becomes more positive and hopeful rather than just shining a light on look how tragic this is, you know? Yeah. So again, this is part of allowing for surprises and adapting to the people we work with, because otherwise, if it's just according to myself, it will be more on certain aspects, but by opening up to hear what they are looking into or what they think is lacking in their presentation, that allows more surprises too. And in the end, we all really, really love the outcome.
Yeah, yeah. Very. I think back to what we talked about is collaborative. You know, you never know what you might get if you listen to someone else.
Yes,
and
for
see
sure.
But again,
for sure.
What was it? Sorry. Flexible perfectionist.
Yeah.
Is it? Okay. And so now I want to ask about, the topic of this episode, is kind of what we're thinking between producer and directors, right? Both of you have played the role of both producers and directors. I want to ask, in your opinion, or the industries, if you can comfortably speak for them, what is the role of a producer? I'm a producer and I still find it difficult to define what I do.
There's many kinds of producers. I think you've got to look at, a very clear definition would be, are you like a line producer? Are you organizing everything and in charge of all the departments and getting things done? Are you more of a sort of traditional above the line producer, you might meet with a director, love their story, want to help them fundraise to get the project off the ground. You might then own some of the IP as an EP or as a producer. So are you really just like a logistical producer, or are you like more on the above the line side, raising money?
It just depends on, well, is this an interest thing, or you really have to, like, I feel line producer you can get into, but above the line producers?
I mean, it's so fluid, especially these days where, it's very hard to raise money, and people are just really hustling and going after things in different ways. The model has changed a lot. So, for example, I started out as a fixer, and then I was a line producer for both feature film and television. So I was very much the person that's just arranging everything. From a logistical point of view, you're hiring all the crew, and you get told what the budget is, and you work out what's the most efficient way to get what we need on screen for the director or something like that, right? But then, you could be a producer that, if you're talented at business and negotiation and you want to help raise money for projects, then that's a different kind of production. So, yeah. Okay. So there's many different types. And then there's like story production. I was a story producer for reality TV for a few years in Singapore for like Asia's Next Top Model and The Apprentice, and that's a different kind of production because you're kind of directing also. So you can be a creative producer who also directs. So there's a lot of different types.
What about you, Nicola? Does that kind of fit your same kind of description?
Yeah, from experience, definitely as a director working with producers, there's the line producer type and executive producer. But yeah, as a director, I work with producers in order to achieve or extend my network and making the piece more achievable. So I really love working with a more transparent producer to bring in, say, cast options or distribution options even, and or bring in people that they know of that as a director I could pitch the story to. So it's, a variety, but I would say it's like the extension of me for the betterment of the piece.
So in general, for anyone who's interested in becoming a producer, there's two main types of producers that you mentioned. One kind of above the line. Line producer, it's like scheduling.
But I think everyone needs
logistics.
to really, I'm a firm believer in everyone starting from, production assistant level, because I think only by starting there, it's all about observing, right? Observing any kind of production, whether it's factual or scripted, feature or short form, the best way for a production to operate to get the result, right? And I think you need to, my advice would be to go in at the bottom and just in any role, in camera department, in production department, as an extra, just observe and be in as many different departments as possible and learn and observe the way things are done for the best outcome.
To add on to that, I think to become a producer, a good one especially, the biggest asset of a producer would be their network, the people that they know, the people that they could bring in for your specific piece versus your specific piece. And that's how you work your way up, by expanding the people you know that you could bring in. And I think for me, the most difficult aspect is maintaining a good relationship, even when you throw that person into a new project that you may not know of everyone. You may not know how the outcome might be. It could be a very frustrating process, or it could be a surprisingly smooth process. So all of that is unknown. But it's a good producer will bring in these talents necessary for the piece, but also maintaining the piece, I feel.
So then, One thing is, in Hong Kong, obviously you guys are more experienced than myself, but I don't see a lot of smaller to medium-sized productions ever using a producer. Usually a director will just do that work if they have to. I'm more talking, my experience has just been people doing passion projects and stuff, right? But usually the lines are blurred everywhere when you're working on smaller projects. Where, specifically in Hong Kong, where does the line end at the director and start at the producer, or is it always been blurred?
It just depends on the budget of the piece. So you can be a producer director, and know how both those roles, work and what you need to do to cover both those roles. But it just really depends on the budget. If you've got a slightly larger budget, then you're likely to have different people for those roles. Where does the line cross? I mean, essentially the director is in charge of every creative decision. They can collaborate and talk, and the producer can advise them, especially if they're a creative producer or they're also a producer that knows how to direct. They can advise on what's going to work, but essentially all creative decisions come from the director. And the producer traditionally there in film is there to make sure the director's vision can be executed. That's the kind of traditional,
Is there a line that you as directors, if you work with producers, is there a line you kind of set with your producers to be like, thanks for the input, this is where you're responsible?
I think that comes back to relationships, and you have to work with people. No one wants to work with assholes. Can I say assholes? You want to have a team of people that you trust, but also have respect for what each other is doing, right? So I'm, as a director, having been on all sides in many roles, I know what producers go through, right? I know, it's a total bollock, and you're the first one there in the morning, you're the last one there at night, you're dealing with 100 things. So I think it's good for directors to have had production experience, because you know what's realistic on a production front. There's no point, especially in this day and age, just coming in and demanding X, Y, and Z. It's just not realistic, right? So I think if you know how those roles work, then you respect the decision that me or you is making as a producer. I can trust that you're saying that for a reason. That I know that if you could do it differently to try and execute my vision better, you would. But there's a reason you can't. So let's think of a solution. So I think you have to trust the people. You have to be transparent. You have to throw ego out the window, and you have to all be on the same page to execute the vision as closely as possible. Right. And I think it comes down to just trust and respect, and being, the kind of people that people want to work with. I mean, as Nicola says, you've got to maintain those relationships. If you're going out as a producer to find locations for a film, you've got to be transparent that it's going to be a complete nightmare for this cafe. It's not production is not an easy thing. You're going to be inconveniencing them. If you're not paying them a lot of money, then you've got to be honest and friendly with them, because they don't owe you anything, right? You want people to, cut you a little slack and do you a favor. So it's all about relationships and being someone that someone wants to help, in their.
And that's not easy.
That's not easy.
To convince someone to help you for almost no cost, what's in it for them if it's not much, the convincing is not easy.
Yeah,
I feel.
and you've got to tell the truth. I remember I was working on a feature film, and someone in the production department, she was new to film. She'd convinced her boyfriend that we could film in his apartment, and he was going to be out all day. And he turned up at night, and there's 30 crew, and there's lights, and the furniture is all in one room. And he just walks in, and he's like, "What the hell is going on?" Because she was just like, "Oh, don't worry, it'll just take a few hours." We were there for 24 hours. So you've got to be really realistic with people, because then if you are, and tell them it's going to be a nightmare, anything less than a total nightmare, they'll be like, "Oh, well, I'll let you do it again," because it's just about, as Nicola says, it's really about relationships and just being open and honest, and not being a dick, basically. Days on set are long. You want to be working with people that get on. No one wants to be. There's nothing worse than being on a crew where there's tension or people don't get on, and you're stuck there till 3 a.m. It's like torture, right? So it's really about relationships and being, especially in production, starting out being that PA that is open to, helping, think proactively, help in any way you can, but also respect the other roles.
Paying your dues, starting at a production assistant. So, starting off, I think when I first started, even though I started quite later, I don't think I've been in the industry 4 years. I think when I first started out, I was much older than I should be, and I remember the idea was just oh, you need me to carry this? You need me to get coffee? You need me to whatever you need me to do, I'll just do it. But it was funny, I was recently talking with my boss, John over there by the camera. He gave me my first gig, and I remember it was with Huawei up in mainland China.
Oh.
And he's like, hey, do you want to just be the production assistant for me? It's just going to be me up there. I need someone to carry all the gear. And we ended up staying at like the St. Regis. And the whole time he was saying like, it's not like this. It's not like this, okay? It's we got like our own hotel room, like butler service. It was like amazing. And he's like, usually we're sleeping together in a single room in like the slums, okay? So don't think this is the normal. So it was like very like different experiences, because it's very, very nice as my first gig, but then I had to tell myself like, look, this is not how it is. You have to pay your dues. You have to, there's a lot of shit going on. So no, I agree. I think the mentality going in is don't expect to be able to hit that role you want within like, I don't know, 10 years or something. You're gonna have to, can I say eat shit? Yeah, like when you start out, especially when you're first starting out, I think there's no expectation that, I studied 4 years at film degree. Sorry, Kais, that's you. But I studied film degree. I immediately get the role that I want. It's like, no, you start a production assistant, you work your way up, you try everything, you taste everything, and then you slowly make it there, I think.
I think that's why, and it is difficult these days, because especially in Hong Kong, there are not a lot of full-time production jobs, right? But my advice to anyone, because a lot of people go instantly into freelance, my advice to anyone would be try and find a company or a project where you can kind of learn the process and the hierarchy, because learn it and then, learn the rules and then go break them. Like, I think it's important to know that structure, but it is tricky these days, because even people who have traditional models of production, models are changing because budgets are changing, but just be a person that's open to anything and just observe everything. Like, just be an extra on a film and just watch what, if you're someone that's got high EQ, which producers should have, I think, they're doing it that way, but I think, they could organize things a bit like this. Just learn, just observe and learn all aspects, I think.
And I think in Hong Kong, one of the best ways to find better jobs in film specifically would be through helping out on people's sets, rather than try to apply on LinkedIn, because they are non-existent on LinkedIn, no way. So I think being such a freelance-driven or majority freelance-driven of an industry here for film, it's best to hop around, and that's how you get to know others, and you get to know other projects that they might be looking for. So that's quite a quick way to kind of navigate in Hong Kong, at least. Yeah.
As two people who have been both directors and producers in some regard, what do you think is the number one quality that you should have as a director, and number one quality you have as a producer? As someone what do you look for most as a director looking at a producer, or if you're a producer looking at a director? What do you think, number one for director, number one for producer?
From the producer side, I think, you just want someone that's very tenacious. There's always a solution, right? There's always going to be a million problems, and there's always there's the good solutions, and you just need someone that's going to fight, push to make it happen. So you need that tenacity. You need sort of someone that can be like swan mode, where you're calm in chaos, but you're thinking a million miles an hour under the surface. Like, I often have people like in terrible situations in production, people are like, wow, how can you stay so calm? And you're like, I'm outwardly calm. I'm thinking of like, 500 different scenarios under the water, but you need to stay calm, because if the producer, loses their temper or, starts falling apart in a very stressful production, then the whole thing crumbles, right? You have to find, and it's character and attitude, like Nicola's saying, you've got to be calm, you've got to stay calm, but you've got to be thinking 20 steps ahead and just thinking of the solutions.
How do you remain that calm, especially on set?
I don't know, I'm not sure.
Any tricks, breathing, breath work?
Breath work, no, I don't think it's breath work. You just know, you've got to trust that there will be a solution, and you've got to trust, well, depending on the size of the project, you might have, 10 other people in your production department. You might be the only producer, but you've got to trust that there's a way to solve it, which means that you just have to take a breath and think through it logically and think about, the best thing for that scenario, right? I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know how to be calm, but you just have to be.
For me, well, it's more like line producing and stuff. Whenever we prep for a shoot or anything, I just think of all the worst case scenarios ahead of time, so that if it does happen,
exactly.
I'm like, oh, I need, like the most basic one is weather, right? If you have a shoot on a boat and you need the sun to be up and shining at all times, well, sit down and talk with the crew about, okay, if it rains, how are we going to do that? And how are we going to solve that? And tell the client, like, if it rains, I can't control the weather.
Yeah.
We have to reschedule, you know?
You have to be very anal. You have to think of everything. You can only control so much to a point. There's always, shit happens and it always will. But as long as you have gone through all the eventualities in advance, I mean, Caius will love this from adage from post, but say fix it in post, but it's really fix it in pre, right? Yeah. The more you do in pre-production saves you, your whole production. You've got to be overly prepared in prep. You never want to be turning up to set as a producer not knowing exactly kind of every movement of what needs to happen when for the next couple of days. And the more prepared you are in pre-pro, your shoot will go better, you'll have more options in post, you'll have a better product. There will always be stuff you have not thought of because something new always comes up. We had this location for a feature film during COVID, and it was an apartment for the main couple. We needed to shoot for 2 weeks in it. We had to build, it was a shell, it was in a tongla. We had to build out the whole thing. It was like a month-long negotiation to get this property because the owners didn't really want crew in there during COVID. It was just, to get the property was a nightmare. And then the day before we start filming, we turn up to the building and the whole building is clad in bamboo scaffolding, covering all the windows and everything. And the reason we got that Tongla apartment is because they had the most perfect balcony where the couple could stand and look over TST, and there was nice neon light shining in. And suddenly it's covered in construction, right? That you had no idea about, that the owner never told you about. And so then you've got 24 hours. We managed to get them to talk to the contractors, and they basically cut a section of the scaffolding and the netting, and there were some structural poles that couldn't be cut, but we basically got them to cut out a section so we could still film. It's things that you're never going to expect happen. And it's always the day before, and it's always a public holiday, so you can't contact anyone. Generally is how it happens. But you just have to think, well, that's happened. I can't make that not happen. How do we, well, in that case, it was with money. How do we get around this problem, right? It's talking to them very nicely for 3 hours and then slipping them a red packet. That often helps.
Okay.
That helps. I think number one quality for a director to have would be vision. Being able to see it, imagine it, and picture it, and so you really use that as a blueprint almost to then delegate to your team, find the best people for your team, communicate. Actually, communication is very important too, to articulate the vision, whether it be from speaking to using references to storyboarding to just drawing stick figures out. That also helps too, or visiting, or doing site visits and speak about and imagining with how you will film it and communicate that with the DP. And to me, DP is always like my eye's best friend. In general, a director should have a clear vision, clear communication skills.
Okay.
I would agree. I mean, I was going to say, just have that bigger picture outlook and the vision, and then just being a people person that can communicate that your heads of department and all the people on your crew want to do their best for. Because the director really sets the tone for the working environment on sets. And if you're a director that gets on with the crew and is easy to work with, people want to do their best for you, right? And then it's not torture. We're all doing it because we're passionate about that feeling of creating, those magic moments, and you want the director's really the glue that holds the crew together.
So I do want to talk a little bit about the personal projects. Specifically, you created Daffodil in 2018?
Yes.
Right? And then you had My Life in the Box, which was in 2011. I'll start with My Life in a Box. Just a little bit of information, My Life in a Box. Would you like to share a little bit about the synopsis of what the story was?
So it's about a Hong Kong Tai, a lady who we see quite superficially at the beginning, who develops quite an obsessive relationship with her domestic helper. We learn through the film that the Tai has actually lost a child at stillbirth, and she becomes obsessed with her domestic helper because when she's coming through her grief, she witnesses the very close relationship her helper has with her child. She really gravitates to this woman who has obviously radiates a lot of love, has her own children in the Philippines, has a bond with her own child. So she latches onto her as she's going through her grief. Yeah.
So what I found really interesting was you have 3 different languages in the film. There's Cantonese, there's Tagalog, and there's English. How do you ensure that the message, because with like when you're writing, there's certain narratives, some things that you want points to hit, and certain notes, like words that you write in your native tongue, that you need to make sure those key points are translated, and it's hard to kind of like highlight each one. Is it a meticulous process, or is it?
It is quite a meticulous process because you have to trust. I mean, I just only speak a little bit of Chinese, so you have to really trust who you're working with, know that they have the same vision for the project as you, and then there's a lot of meetings and discussing, what those lines should be, what cultural meaning certain lines might have, just really discussing and then getting third-party opinions on it as well. So it is quite a process to make sure you've got it right. Yeah.
If you're willing to share, I'm curious. It's just because you managed to get Eugenia Yuan from who was quite a big actor at the time and was in Memoirs of the Geisha. How do you get these people? Is it just connections? And like, how was the funding that worked for that? Is it like self-funded?
It was self-funded. So I met Eugenia because she was acting in a film called Jasmine by director Dax Phelan that was shot in Hong Kong, maybe in 2009 or 10. I can't quite remember. And I was location manager for that film. So I was on set a lot, and I met her through that film, and we got quite close. And then when I was writing this one, I just thought I thought she was an incredible actress, and just thought she'd be perfect. And she read the script and was happy to do it. So, I mean, it was self-funded. Everyone did it for very little. This is quite a while ago now, so people were still like young and hungry and fresh and willing to do a lot for very little. But even when people do it for very little, it still adds up, right? So I think by the time I shot it, and then it was a 30-minute film, and then we rented the cinema, I think still paying at least maybe like 200,000 Hong Kong. But, so that kind of bankrupted me at the time, but because it's expensive, right? Things are expensive. Yeah. And I look back at it now, and it's like, it feels like almost like a student film to me, because it was my first time doing scripted, and so obviously there's a million things you would do differently. Okay. We didn't have enough budget to really art direct one of the rooms, and it just looks, you can tell it's kind of being thrown together quite quickly, and there's so many things you would look at and change, but that's with any project. I think you would do things differently.
I think it's also with any project that is yours personally, you always see the holes.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see any of that. Okay. I thought it was great. I thought it was wonderful. I had a lot of fun watching it.
Good stuff.
Yeah, because we've had times where we've done our own things, and you might have paid the crew, we paid them nothing. We were like, sorry, do this for the experience, because they're friends with us, and passion projects. We do that a lot, but yeah, it just seems, funding is always like the question that people ask when you self-fund. It's like locations is like the huge thing. If you can convince people to take a much lower rate or no rate at all. But yeah, that's
locations for when you need big locations. You obviously don't have a budget. Like we had that duplex apartment. It was just really calling around property agencies and really just trying to beg people to give you an apartment.
Because I thought of that as well. Like if there's a bunch of empty apartments. If you're like, hey, I'll take out some insurance, and it's sitting empty anyways. Can we shoot there for like?
And you can do things like, we had a screening of the film, and through the tickets we raised some money for charity. So you can think of ways to make it more attractive for people to say yes, because.
But the charity has to be a real charity. It can't be.
It has to be a real charity, not the Lindsay's Pocket charity. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Okay then. I also wanted to ask about Daffodil. So if you could share a little bit about Daffodil.
Similar to Lindsay's piece, it was completely self-funded, literally from all the savings I could have had at the time from commercial work before. So yeah, Daffodil is a short film that's about a workaholic in face of sudden news of her estranged mother's death. So it's a piece literally about her receiving this news from her estranged brother that their mother passed away via suicide, and then from hearing this news, how she processed her past with her in that split-second moment that in her mind stretches out into like a, in my case, a 17-minute short film.
Yeah, I especially love the, what I call the memory world, or the reservoir where she walked through. It's like purple, beautiful. It was, first of all, this is VFX was crazy. I thought it was very well done. And I was wondering, was that like how you pictured it in the beginning?
Yes.
It's exactly how do you get from there to...
I mean, something I imagine, and then of course I found references. Pinterest is great for that. That and the staircase scene as well. Again, for these more CG heavy scenes or surreal scenarios, yeah, I had at least a batch of references to use to speak to my crew and to then discuss on how to actually practically make it. Actually, one of your guests, your first guest, Richie, has played a crucial role in the making of Daffodil. He has always been very interested since young into hiking. So he brought me to like the most obscure places to find the perfect spot that's suitable for the script happenings, the plot.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pre-production going to. So when you saw the final place, you were like, "This is."
Yes.
This was in my mind.
Yes, and I really thank the crew for this piece particularly. Whilst I did pay a bit, again, not too much, I really thank them for their patience and interest to go beyond the assigned tasks, such as going with me, for example, Richie really showed me a batch of like different places he drove. He's the one who thought of all the spots that we could check out, and these are like big afternoons that I'm asking for that I didn't per se pay by the hour, but it was through our collective vision and our collaboration and our wish to tell the best it can be for the story. So it was truly a labor of love, sweat, tears. Apparently I traumatized a few of them that they still jokingly pick on me for. But I think overall really went beyond what I imagined, thanks to the crew and collaboration spirit, to where it could go after and how it has subsequently helped me in my ongoing and future pieces as well.
Okay. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt like these two films specifically were kind of like the love child, the one that you guys put is, it was your first time or your first effort, so it's putting all this my language is not, it's all the experience you've gathered, and then you put it into this first piece, and obviously you have had pieces afterwards and more pieces in the future, but this is kind of like a very defining kind of experience for you guys, and I think every filmmaker will have a defining piece no matter what it is. So I want to move on to a topic that I was very excited to talk about, especially because on the previous episodes we don't have many women in the industry, especially also guests. We've only had like 2 guests on the past like 8 episodes we've done that have been women. Now we finally have more women that are working in the industry. I kind of want to talk about what that's like, and I know earlier you mentioned the bar for women directors or women in film is so much higher and it's so much more critical. Is that, I know you mentioned that, is that like...
I feel that's the case. I don't know what you think, Nicola.
I think I got a little lucky. I started out with doing zero budget films, and actually the one piece, zero budget documentary piece, then got seen by people at the Women's Foundation. And at the time, again, things were just aligned. It just was aligning. It wasn't even up to my control. But basically, at the time when they saw my piece, they were looking for a female director to tackle their project that they've been preparing for a while now. They even had someone funded the entire project, and they just need someone to jump on board. I was like their third choice, I think. The previous two, I think something didn't work out, and then they were still looking for like a third option. And there I was. My piece was somehow presented to them when they were looking for a female, specifically female director to work on their subject matter, which is about media's influence on young girls, particularly within Hong Kong culture. After the piece was launched, I became kind of known to do women's stories, working for NGOs. There was like all these kind of like categories. I felt people sort of start placing me in and start approaching me in that sense. I think I must say I'm blessed in that sense. I wasn't made to feel like, oh, she's a woman, she's lesser. And I think Hong Kong also was a great platform for that. I personally haven't had too much discrimination, but hey, who knows if I'm getting paid lesser than a male, who knows? But at the time I was just building my opportunities. I didn't care as much. I can't care as much about these. I just want to grab this job, that job, say most yeses to, say yes to most people, to my best capability, and that's just how I started working. But of course, I got to a point where people do start sort of labeling me as like, oh yeah, she's that feminist filmmaker. I'm like, sure, you can categorize me as that, but I feel I'm more than that too. So I think over the next few years afterwards, I was also trying to make more passion projects to really showcase my other interests.
I think often it can be what's ingrained in your own head that can set your limits or your boundaries. I kind of started in the industry sort of just after the year 2000, and I was working for male directors. And I think a lot of women fall into production because production being quite an organizational role, women are quite good at organizing, I think, multitasking. So a lot of women fall into production, but within that production, I was doing a lot of factual programming where you're out on the field and you're becoming a producer director essentially because you're directing segments. The main director will be somewhere else. You're doing the interviews, you're directing the segments, you're following the characters, etc. So I think really since like 2002, I was probably directing, and this is my issue, my sort of imposter syndrome issue, it's only really been in the past 5 years that I would confidently call myself a director. I don't know why. I don't know. That's maybe just, having grown up with men are traditionally directors, women are the producers. I would always say I'm a producer. I'm a producer who directs stuff. But it's only been, and I had a couple of production companies, and so we'd often be, if I wasn't the director, I'd be producing the work we were making. In the past 5 years, I've done more jobs where I'm being hired by another production company just as a director, which is like such a joy because you're not dealing with the transportation and the catering, and you're not there at 5 a.m. sorting out whatever. I'm like, oh my God, I just need to turn up and have done my prep and my shot list and then leave before everyone else. That was a huge revelation to me in my 40s, right? And so only then, when I was being paid just to direct, was I confident to call myself a director. And that is not cool, young people out there. Women, own it. If you're directing, you're a director. And I think it took me a long time to reconcile with that because I'd always been this producer that worked for male directors. So that's on me, maybe.
Is that something you've encountered with maybe other producers or other women in the industry that they feel the same way?
I'm not sure. I look out to people who are female directors that have never had an issue owning that, and I think, well, good on you. I should have been more like that. I'm not sure if that's quite a common feeling. I definitely know that a lot of women maybe get stuck in production, get stuck in that role that would rather be doing something else.
So you mentioned about like how women are better at organizing things. Like there's this stigma that you encounter, with gender throughout the world. Do you think there is this stigma that exists? All the stereotypes and stigma exists for the genders in filmmaking, or do you think that filmmaking is unique in a way that we don't have that?
I think there must, if you look, I was just looking up this morning, like last year, out of the 250, highest grossing films, 16% were directed by women, right? Which has gone up since 2003, I think it was 2.7%. So things have improved, but that 16% is still very, very low. And I think more and more these days, investors and studios are quite risk adverse. So if you're not a female that's already directed, a successful film, people are less willing to maybe take a risk on you than they might be with a male director. I don't know. But that 16% is still very low and should go higher. I think the number of female writers and cinematographers is gradually getting more and more. And I think when a woman is directing a film, she's more likely to bring on more female people and heads of department roles as well, maybe. But the overall statistic is still, it's very low compared to.
But that's why personally I'm quite inspired by pieces like The Substance, which is also created by a female filmmaker, and the subject matter is just as explicit and gross and memorable.
It's so good. Have you seen
it's
it?
slashing.
Oh, it's so good.
I've been holding off on seeing it. My wife wants to watch it.
It's my favorite of last year, at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really an outstanding piece. Again, one of those films I went in not really knowing what's it about. I just know there's a substance-related thing. But yeah, I love that there's not much dialogue. It was quite action-based. It's a very simple and even straightforward message about women's pressure on maintaining beauty and youth. And that's really all the whole thing was about. Demi Moore was great. Everyone behind it was great too. So that is also, I think, for me, inspiring to see that it could be done. It's out there. And just as long as we're not afraid or think about how I'm a woman or not, just focus on the story you want to tell, the vision, and be observant as well as to what the market, what's out there in the markets, what's relevant to the world we're living in now, which is chaos, to put it simply. So therefore, with that said, what kind of stories would people be into? That could also be a factor. I wouldn't say the priority, but definitely a factor to consider as to what kind of stories you want to make, and get back a little bit of a control to how you want audience to react to it.
I think you said a very important word there, is just be brave. Like, I think as a female that you want to be a director, you just have to go for it, right? You just have to be brave, you have to be passionate, and so into the story you want to tell. And as Nicola said, especially these days with funding being so difficult, you have to think of audience first and think, who's actually going to want to watch this, or who's going to care about this, because where's my money going to come from to make this? But you just have to go for it and hustle and take risks and be, practice, hone your craft, your writing or your directing, and just really focus.
Do you think, do you believe we need more or need to continue the promotion of female filmmakers? Like women-specific film festivals, funding opportunities programs dedicated to women filmmakers?
Yes, please. Why not? Of course.
Yeah, I think there's many groups that need to, and I feel like, unfortunately, we still do have to do that. I say unfortunately because we should be by now in a place where we don't have to focus on this is for women or this is for men. But I think in order to get that 16%, closer to the halfway mark, then there clearly needs to be.
And then the goal is to get to a space where we don't need this?
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
do you think it should always be in place to ensure that we don't fall back?
I think in our lifetime, I would like more support. Why not? Film industry is such a man-made space. All the connections and opportunities are all man-made. It's honestly, to me, beyond one's an individual's talent or having a good script. Almost, to me, that's not enough. Sure, that's a great foundation or base to have. You need to at least have that. But then half the battle, or more than half, it's about who you know, who's willing to support, and who has, who took an eye. Sorry, how should I say this? Who believed in your piece? Because honestly, almost like dating, right? Like you can't expect everyone to like you, but if you have one person who believes in you, that's what it takes. So to me, therefore, support system is always still crucial. These women-centric supporting group also help elevate our work and a little bit away from otherwise the big mass or big ocean of talents. Now we could be in a specific pool and rise from there and then jump out to the ocean or something. So that's my thoughts, at least, too.
You have to trust in yourself, I think. I think for many years I didn't probably trust in myself, and you just have to. You just have to be, even fake it till you make it. You just gotta.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's all the time and questions that we have. I want to thank our guests for coming on the show. I want to thank the crew for making this all possible. And as they say in the film industry, that's a wrap. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Hive Studios, for giving us the location and sponsoring this video. And see you next time. This is Nathan Han from the Filmmakers Journey. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.